Alright, what's up guys? Theaveragegamer signing on back with another video, and unfortunately it's that time. I kind of put it off for as long as I could, but it's time to talk about Tekken 8 Season 2. You know, part of me wondered if I even wanted to talk about this, but then I remembered that I actually made a video when Tekken 8 first came out regarding the gameplay design that this game has, so I may as well just do it now. I mean, we've been here before. By the way, of course, if you want to check out that video, it'll be in the card below. Most of my points still stand because Season 2 apparently doubled down on everything. This, of course, coming off the heels of many player complaints, both from pros and casual players alike, that the game is too offensive, it has very casino-like gameplay, its fun is very simple-minded, although, granted, a little harsh, but all valid in some ways. This also comes off the heels of Tekken acknowledging this. Both Harada, Michael, and the crew actually came out and said that the game was going to get more defensive in Season 2. So I think the player perspective was that, you know, things were going to get better. We tried this thing in Season 1. We may have overcorrected some things, but Season 2, we're going to scale back a little bit, see if we can give this offensive game a little bit more defensive identity. So I think there was a lot of hope going into this season. But yeah, that didn't last long. Now, you guys haven't seen any Tekken 8 Season 2 vids on the channel yet. That's just because I wanted to get this video out first. I wanted to give my thoughts on Season 2 after reading all the patch notes, and also for my specific character in particular, and also played some games off of YouTube just to see what this was like, and yeah, your boy has some thoughts. In all honesty, this whole situation is somewhat disappointing. I mean, the community is straight up in an outroar right now, and of course, Michael and Harada are catching a lot of flack, some of which completely unwarranted, by the way. I mean, let's be clear, it is still a game. At the end of the day, we don't need to be making insults or anything like that, but a lot of this anger is, in my opinion, coming from a relatively justified place. Straight up, the community feels like it was lied to. They feel like a game that they've enjoyed for decades is being stripped down to being something utterly simplistic. Let's actually get into Season 2 as a whole and my personal problems with it. Now, if you watched my first video on why Tekken 8's game design is confusing, a lot of this will sound familiar because they double down on a lot. But I'm going to be getting a little more specific than I did in that video, because there are certain things they did in this balance patch, or Season 2 as a whole, that I think really demonstrates the core fundamental problem with this game. It's not just a gameplay thing, it's more a game design thing. Now, before we get into that, I think it is important to mention that, yes, the whole point of Tekken 8, we've known this essentially since the start, is that this game is going to get a new identity. They said from the get-go that they wanted to make the game a little bit more offensive-leaning, and personally, I have zero issue with this, and to be honest, based on what I see from player perspectives, both pro and casual, I don't think they even have a problem with Tekken 8 getting more offensive either. It's more so how that offense is achieved and how the game's design warrants itself into being an offensive game, but a very simple offensive game. And that simplicity is very important to note. I'm probably going to say it multiple times throughout this video, because it seems like the philosophy of this game is to make it so simple that even something as character strengths and weaknesses are somehow not important, or being kind of swept under the rug in an effort to make everyone in this game offensive, thus contributing to the game's core game design philosophy. And of course, the main contributor to this offensive game is, of course, their new system mechanic in Heat. Now, I do want to say, before we go into the patch notes in particular, I actually don't mind Heat in concept, at least. I mean, let's be honest, we've seen many offensive mechanics throughout the years that each character can use, but again, it's not that it being an offensive mechanic is the issue, it's how it's actually designed that's the problem. And of course, this leads us into the Season 2 Heat changes. I'll put the patch notes in particular on the screen so you can read it in its actual quote, but just to paraphrase, they say that offense is formulaic, causing a lack of expression, but then say advantages of Heat are too great. Now, to be clear, this actually is pretty true, I would argue. I think Heat kind of structures itself in a very simplistic and formulaic way. I think it does cause a lack of expression because characters in this game kind of feel similar in terms of how they actually utilize Heat. But then we get to how they change Heat, and it kind of, I don't want to say contradictory, but it just leaves me in a state of confusion. So the big change to Heat is that upon hitting a Heat engager, a character can transition to crouch. And again, I mean, that's a fine change, I guess, but the reasoning is so odd to me. They say that they did this because characters who don't have mid-low mix don't utilize Heat system to its max potential. And to that I have only one question. Why is that an issue? I mean, don't get me wrong, we want characters to be able to utilize the system mechanic somewhat well, but if the only way that a character can utilize a system mechanic is by giving them some mid-low mix, then it sounds like your system mechanic is quite frankly just one-dimensional in concept and you need to add more dimensions to it, not doubling down on said one dimension. Look, not all characters are the same. This is something that Tekken, by the way, has historically valued. So if not all characters are the same, and they shouldn't be, why should we make them all use the heat system the exact same way, just a mid-low mix fest? I mean, on the surface, it seems like you added another option to the bag. Oh, you can crouch during a heat engager now, very nice, but you actually just made heat even more one-dimensional than it already was. Because you just doubled down on the one dimension, given characters who did not rely on mix-ups now having the ability to have mix-ups. Where system mechanics in other games are meant to accent or enhance a character's potential game plan, Heat consolidates every single character to being an offensive powerhouse, and that just removes the variety that this game has stood on for decades. And this goes to the game design of the Heat system. It's just too one-dimensional. Let's be honest, there's not a ton you can do with Heat besides be offensive. I mean, when you look at Drive in Street Fighter 6 or Roman Cancel in Guilty Gear Strive, they give players insane amount of options on how to utilize them, both defensive and offensive, achieving the player expression we are made to believe Tekken is valuing right now. But is there player expression in a mechanic that kind of forces every character to do the exact same thing? A mid-low mix-up. I mean, hell, you kind of just admit to us that that's the point of the mechanic, so I can't really blame more defensive-oriented characters going for these things, because honestly, there's not much else to do, and if there is, it's probably not the best thing to do. Now, this offense doesn't just show itself in the system mechanic, it shows itself in the character changes as well. Let's take a look at my boy Paul Phoenix, for instance. So if you watch any of my videos on Tekken 8 thus far, you know Paul is my main. I like the character a lot. He's a character that has a solid mix-up, obviously, in Devil Fist and Demo Man. That's a classic. Not to mention, he's one of the better utilizers of the Heat system. But beyond that, he actually is a pretty defensive character. His ability to open up people with good defense isn't insanely high, and he relies on counter hitting and punishing to get a lot of his stuff off. And then after that defensive play is achieved, you can transition to being an offensive juggernaut with good Oki and things like forward 1+2. He can generate plus frames very well. Then after that, you can transition to a more offensive mix-up style. Down forward 1 goes into sway. You have a low option, you have a mid option, that's a heat engager. You have a high option, that's +1 on block. You can also do 3-2 into sway, you get the same thing. So we have a character with good offense, good defense, has the ability to switch between the two. The character also utilizes heat very well. And what did they do? More offense, of course. So our big boy Paul has two new moves, both from Deep Dive. One is a homing high that launches on normal hits. Let me go ahead and say that again. It launches on normal hits. And the other is a low that is +6 on hit and does insane damage. Both these moves have insane range, by the way. You can do them practically at full screen. So the sidestepping to the right and good defensive players in general that was a weakness for this character is now less of a problem because, again, characters are not allowed to have weaknesses. This is the philosophy, this is the game design of Tekken 8. Characters with weaknesses, especially if those weaknesses are in terms of offense, bad. And of course, Paul was already good in Heat, but why not give him even more stuff? Double Fist is a guard break in Heat now because I guess the character needed that. He also gets another move in Heat in 4-4-2 1+2. Good against sidestep right. Again, lessening a weakness Paul has. And for your trouble, it's also +1 on block. So that offense-defense versatility Paul had, yeah, that's gone. There really isn't a reason to not play Gorilla and swing some more because despite damage nerf, he still hits hard and now he's even more of a mix-up threat with those two moves. And in addition to that, they made sway and deep dive easier to do because apparently quarter circles are too difficult. Don't get me wrong, I'm all for accessibility, but yeah, I think we're stretching it with that one. So in my prior vid, I mentioned that fundamentally Tekken 8's game design is very flawed because there seems to be a lack of understanding on how offensive games are actually achieved. Offensive leaning games are nothing new, but this game fails to achieve one that actually works because offensive games need defensive backbones, and this game doesn't have a ton of it. Without this backbone, these offensive games tend to devolve into uncontrolled chaos that, although might be somewhat balanced as characters are all broken and powerful, it ends up not being fun beyond a surface level, because there is no complexity that the game actually offers. Tekken 8's doubling down on offense makes it lose all complexity because offense overshadows defense to such a degree that many interactions come down to guessing and being forced to take very big attacks that generate plus frames, and thus the cycle continues. We see other games like Street Fighter 6 lean towards more offense but have a defensive backbone that enables a little more thought into how interactions play out. Something as simple as invincible DPs and perfect parry force the offensive opponent to think before continuing pressure, because the tables might turn and the defensive player has a choice to get out of pressure that they must think on when to actually use it. And again, we see this in other games, faultless defense in Guilty Gear Strive, something as simple as advancing guard and push block in games like Marvel vs. Capcom. These things, although sound simple, and sometimes people just use it intuitively, but these are core backbones that these offensive leaning games have in order to control the chaos that the said offense provides. It becomes a battle of player versus player, not player versus game design, and Tekken 8 leans to the latter way too often. Now, of course, let me mention games like Street Fighter 6 is not perfect in any regard, but in terms of designing an offensive leaning game, I think it achieves it in a way better way than Tekken 8 does. Oh, and just like to be completely fair here, they did actually buff some defense. You can sidestep during recovery frames now, I think, and chip damage is lessened across the board. But again, these things become, quite frankly, footnotes, because they're buried under a mountain of offensive changes, not just in terms of character-specific changes, but also the offensive system mechanic in Heat. So we've seen things like this happen before across fighting games, and so it's typical in situations like this. Many begin invoking casual players or newer players in this succession, saying that the Tekken team is catering to them, and although I understand where that thinking may come from, I think both people, both long-term fans and the Tekken team, have very odd and quite sometimes simplistic ideas on what casuals actually value in games, and how to not only bring those casuals in, but to also keep them long-term. So to start, I think it's important to note that in terms of getting casuals in the door, gameplay is actually not really the focus. The game must look great, sound great, have a great online, have great content, both multiplayer and single player, and have the general ability to learn so players feel like there's always something to work towards. These are things that ensure that at the very least, casuals can come in and at least get to the door. Keep in mind that none of this actually has anything to do with gameplay. That's not really a thought when trying to get casuals in, at least initially. And Tekken 8, to its credit, overall at least, achieves this, and thus casuals came to the door. And the casual appeal to Tekken 8 was there. You saw this in sales, and you also saw this how the game reviewed initially. Okay, so we got our casuals in. How do we keep them? This is when we get to the actual gameplay. And really on this front, it's also not that complicated. You want a game that feels good with moves that look and are impactful and have a variety of moves and playstyles to match. You want new players to feel like their moves are doing something, while also giving them a character that they can actually do those moves with that they like. Now, full disclosure, in my opinion, this does mean that offensive-leaning games are a little easier to achieve this than defensive games are. We saw this in a game like Guilty Gear Strive, for instance, where the impact of moves were kind of centered around how high damaging the moves actually were, and we also see this in other games as well. And on this front, once again, Tekken 8 achieves this. Moves are flashy, they have impact, they do damage, the whole 9 yards, but then we get to the next part. If we got casuals to the door, made gameplay for them that allowed them to stay for the ride, the natural implication of this is that they're going to get better, especially if the ability to learn is there, as I mentioned earlier, which it is. Tekken 8 has a good replay system, good training mode, and the new counter hit and punish markers in-game allow new players, and more experienced ones at that, to learn on the fly. And there, I think we actually get to the problem, or potential problem. Because if casuals get better, and as they are getting better, they're going to start noticing and experiencing the deeper things the gameplay has to offer. They start attempting to figure out how to handle things that annoy them, or killing things in general at low rank. We more experienced players love to call these the scrub killers, the scrub killing characters, the scrub destroying moves and things. Casual players eventually are going to try to figure out how to deal with those things. So what happens when they figure out that so many things in this game they can't actually do that much about? What happens when they realize that the offense this game has leans more towards guessing and 50-50s way more often than it should? What happens when they realize that every character is just a mix-up heavy threat and achieves their offense in very similar ways, thus killing the variety? Well, at that point, they realize their ability to learn has a clear cap, and so disinterest starts to set in. And funnily enough, they start echoing the same sort of criticisms that more experienced players have. Now, they're not as specific in those criticisms, but the general criticism is still there. Because although surface level fun is fun, it only goes so far, and eventually even newer players start to see and realize that they're not as in control of their character and the game and result of a game that they initially thought they were. And as we talked about earlier, players feeling, particularly newer players feeling, like they are not in control is a not good thing to have for your game. It hurts casuals, not just experienced players. And also keep in mind, we are a year into Tekken 8. The casuals have been here, and by and large, they have stayed. Again, the casual appeal to this game is here. It makes sense why casuals are still sticking with this game. So we're a year into this process. Theoretically, I think it's fair to assume that they've gotten better. And that's why you're starting to see even casual players get a little wary about what's happening right now. So this game doesn't really cater to experienced players, as we're seeing, but it also, in my opinion, doesn't really cater to casual players either. The only group that I could see this catering to is the hypothetical new player that has never played a Tekken game before and bought Tekken 8 during Season 2, but even then, that fun will be achieved, surface level fun of course, but eventually even that player, if we continue down this road, is going to probably start experiencing the same things. And although they probably will stick with the game, and although they probably will still get fun out of it at times, that wary feeling will start to set in more and more, until eventually they play the game less and less. So in my opinion, the game is just not in a great state. It doesn't really serve anybody beyond that hypothetical person I mentioned earlier. Now, I want to be clear. Is the sky falling? Absolutely not. I'm not one of those doomer types. I'm not really black pill. As you guys know if you watch me, I'm a fairly mellow guy. I have my criticism, I have my opinions, but I'm not that adamant in trying to overload every single situation to being dire and world ending or anything like that. And to be clear, I still believe Tekken 8 is a good game overall. I mean, it's getting review bombed now, but there's no mistaking. I think this game does easily more well than it does wrong. And to be fair, since I've been playing Season 2, yes, I have had fun at times. But as a casual player that, yeah, I'm casual, but I have probably a little more experience than most. I'm maybe one tier above a casual. I've been playing Tekken since Tekken 2. Never all that competitively, of course, but I know a thing or two. I definitely know more than a theoretical new player that just started playing in Tekken 8. Even I kind of realize that the fun I'm having is only surface level. When I start engaging players, it comes very clear that I'm fighting systems, I'm fighting game design, not fighting the player. And that's, even for me as a casual, kind of concerning. I think it's also important to note that the things that people like me and pro players and content creators, the things that all of us are saying, funnily enough, don't really have much to do with balance. The balance of the game actually is not really a core part of the problem here. Season 2 could easily go down as a more balanced Tekken 8 than Season 1 was. But if that said balance is achieved by cutting the complexity of the game, cutting the variety of the game because everyone plays the same way, and cutting the fun of the game beyond a surface level, as I mentioned earlier, then I don't think that's actually worth it. I think Tekken 8 deserved to shake up the Tekken series. I think Tekken as a franchise deserved to be a little different. I have no problem with the game becoming more offensive, and I don't really have much of a problem with it maintaining an offensive core going forward. But the execution, in my opinion, is simply lacking. And if it continues, I think more and more people will get upset. You already see the community up in arms. Again, insults and the like, never good. But that anger is coming from almost all sides. Now, to Tekken's credit, Michael, Harada, they've already come out saying that emergency patches are on the way. We're looking at fixing things, particularly the bugs. Obviously, I didn't show it here, but Paul is bugged. Jack is a joke. But again, execution matters. And that's the thing I really want to stress here. I am perfectly fine with an offensive Tekken. I'm fine with offensive Tekken going forward. Make the games offensive. I don't care. But the games still need to have an identity. The core root of what Tekken is still needs to be there. It just needs to be more offensive leaning. And I think Season 1, I wasn't as critical as many people. I think Season 2 is a massive overcorrection and a complete wrong step. And we'll see going forward how they respond. But of course, thank you guys for watching this video. Sorry for the rambling. Let me know your thoughts on Tekken 8 Season 2 and Tekken going forward in the comments below. Let me know what you think about the system changes, the changes to your character, what characters do you like playing against, what characters do you hate playing against. Let me know all your thoughts. I'm going to try to respond to as many comments as I can, just like we did on the last video. We got great engagement on that last video, so hoping that this one spawns even better conversations. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Like, subscribe if you enjoyed. Theaveragegamer signing off. Catch you guys next time.